Welcome back, Whims and Watercolor for Color Crush. We are crushing the color in Chapter 7. This is all about our violets and purples and pinks, my favorite. This is the epitome of color crush, crushing the color. And notice that these are all shades of purple and pink, because in my Schminke Paints palette, and some of you want to know like how to get the really bright colors. Well, I use the Schminke palette. I use the Brilliant Blue Violet, the Brilliant Red Violet. They're all called the Brilliant, so apparently they're pretty bright. Brilliant Purple, Purple Magenta, and Brilliant Opera Rose. So those are the 5 colors I used in this particular exercise. And again, you might not have those particular colors, but if you notice what I'm doing is, as I teach you the lessons, I'm kind of going around my palette. So we did the blues, we did the greens, and so now I would go into some of my reds and violets. And if you look at what I have in my palette, I have the Opera Rose, absolutely need that, the quinacridone rose, and the imperial purple. So if you only have those 3 colors, those would be great. You would use your imperial purple, your quinacridone rose, and your opera rose. Those are going to give you those really super, super bright colors. So whatever pinks and purples you have, you are going to, on page 12, you're going to do a painted doodle. You are going to add white to your pink and purple shades, and look what you're getting when you add the white. So here's just another way to lay out your color ideas with a tiny little illustration and actually the color swatch. So this is going to be a painted doodle. I'm going to do it for you. And then the Picasso quote that says, "Colors, like features, follow the changes of the emotions." And that's a perfect quote for this crazy paint doodle that's just lush and full of very bold pattern, very energetic. Again, using just the pinks and purples. Notice there's no greens, there's no blues. There's just these warm purples and pinks. And on page 13, I reproduced the little organic leaves just to give you the same imagery, but using a different color palette gives you a whole different feeling. And I found this great quote that says, "The object and color and the materials around us actually have a physical effect on us, on how we feel." And that was said by Florence Nightingale. I'm just trying to imagine what she was referencing when she said that. And so she was a nurse, so that's interesting. So I wonder what incident or what that was when she said that. So I did take the violets and the pinks, and I reproduced that same project that we did on page 10. But again, it's just it's some beautiful imagery to kind of capture the essence of the color and mixing the color. To do a painted doodle, you could use your number 8, your number 6, your number 4, because the first thing you're going to do is you're going to draw the doodle. So if I'm going to use my quinacridone rose. Look at this color. I love that color. Look at that quinacridone rose is a beautiful, beautiful color. So I'm going to take my quinacridone rose, and if you just kind of start to follow, I always start with just a wonky little flower shape, just to give the page an identity. And then I could kind of repeat some of the pattern of those petals, just very abstract. This is an abstraction. And then I'm going to I'm going to load up my brush with the imperial purple and just kind of pull this down and just kind of make a little swirl. So this is a lot of fun. Again, practice one in your practice book first. Do some leaf shapes. So see how I'm just doing very, very abstraction. So pull out another line here. I'm going to add some of this blue actually to this purple and see what I get, because you might have a couple of different shades. So just repeat lines, echo lines, make some funky oval shapes, some circles, some squares, and look at how that's kind of bleeding in. So here's a circle. Let me get my opera pink, and let that kind of blend into that purple, to that reddish purple. Roll the brush. See how I'm rolling that brush in the paint? You got to really roll it to get that paint onto your brush. And then you don't run out midstream. And I'm going to soften this a little bit, rinse off. So I'm always rinsing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at this doodle as shapes. I'm not looking at this as imagery. I'm looking at the shape. So here's a shape right in here. Then here is a shape right here. I also have some of the negative space to use. Now what I can also do is take that opera rose, rinse off my brush, add the quinacridone rose. So I just get another shade of pink. And that's what I did here. I just took these colors and I just mixed them together and just kept repeating and just kept adding different colors, and it was just changing the tone. So then what happens after I get some of these washes in here, so this took me the longest of all the pages, and it was fun because it was just very meditative. So now I'm going to take my white gouache again. There's a little blue in there, which is fine. And now I'm going to change that color and add, and now I get like this purpley color, but it's opaque. It's a little bit on the cloudy side. And just kind of go into some of these other shapes that were created. So I'm getting probably like 25 different shades of purple and pink in here. So I think you get the idea. Then when this is bone dry, so let it sit for a couple hours, then you take your white gouache again, start to make some of those marks that are very opaque, and just kind of decorate your doodle. Just decorate the doodle with the white gouache, and you just have these wonderful, wonderful tones where you can add interest to your doodle painting. So I'm going to add, but you got to add the white. So if I just took, oh, here's another thing. If I just took transparent watercolor and went over the transparent watercolor, it's a little lackluster. It's not as exciting as if you have just a brand new color that kind of goes over that transparent watercolor. So make sure that when you're adding your little marks and your little patterns, that you do use the white, because it needs to be opaque and heavy to cover up the transparent watercolor. But looking in here, see, I have this nice transparent purple in here, and I'm just going to add just a couple little colors. So this is fun. You're kind of creating your own little coloring book doodle and just adding color and playing with color. And this is wicked color crush. This is like classic. So that is your page 12, your Picasso quote. I think it's so perfect because this does have an energy and an emotion to it. So hopefully you can get that little intensity in your own work. And let's head on to page 13. So we're still in chapter 7, but now we're on page 13. And my gosh, believe it, that's halfway through already. So what I have some little scraps of watercolor paper, and I kind of tore them so I would have these nice little deckled edges to paint with, to paint my little samples. So that's another good way to just to do some practice in the correct orientation. I suggest you use your 10 or your 8. Actually, I'm going to demonstrate this with the number 8. You see how different this imagery is in pink. I'm not going to have you draw this in every color. I just thought it would be interesting to see it in the green and then in the pink. You're going to do your 5 stems, and the ones in the background are going to be very, very soft. We're just going to have to dilute that color and just get a very soft color. So that's even too much. So there we go. If I actually take it off the stem. So we just want a very light value, the value of milk or tea. And again, just soften that stem. Try to make the stems, very thin with the thin of your brush. Oh, here's one. Here's a good one. That's a lot better. So this could actually be going for the dark. So you want to start out really light. You can add some purples. Little bit of purples, let that paint kind of swim in there. Just give it a little interest. Rinse off, because I want to move that purple just a tad and pull that off. So you see how, again, practice. Now, this is very loosey-goosey. We love loosey-goosey. And see how now those colors are just kind of blending. Here's another thing. The hardest part of this is to not have this harsh line right here. That's the hardest part. So what you need to do is after you draw that line, you want to make sure that you touch it with some water. And I'll go here. You want to make sure you rinse off, touch it with some water just to soften that line. That is the hardest part. And again, that might be something that you deliberately go and practice right in your practice sketchbook. Painting and drawing that light, very light line, adding a little color, and then rinse off your brush and then move the color so that you get rid of the hard edge. Because that's another thing in watercolor, like here's a hard edge that's not really very appealing. So now that I just softened that and the color just blended, you just want to be careful about having straight hard edges. Here's the hard edge right here. And so let me just take a little bit of water or this color here and just soften it into the leaf form. So again, get rid of those harsh lines. So the lighter pink's going to be in the background. The darker ones you're going to pull out front. And as you overlap them, you're giving this picture depth, and it has a little bit more interest and a little bit more dimension. As I showed you in the green lesson, how I just used the dirty water. So this is a little bit better. You can see this a little bit better because, you know, the pink and the purple are pretty high staining pigments. So that's why I got a little bit more color out of this paint than the green. So fill in the background with your dirty water and it will just create this very pleasing imagery of using just the same colors. And if I go back in here, I would actually just now go back with water and soften this edge. So once the paint is dry, you can reactivate it on the page, and I can soften some of these lines because I just showed you how to not get those lines, and there they are. They're just obvious as they're plain as day. So we don't want that. So the more blur, the better. The more subtle the transition is with the edges is the most pleasing when you're doing these little illustrations. So there you have page 13. Again, we're halfway through. There's chapter 7, working with the pinks and the violets, and I'll see you next time with chapter 8.